Hello, health enthusiasts. If you are looking to optimize your body's natural detoxification processes, you're in luck because I have an exclusive free guide just for you. It's called How to Optimize Detoxification, and it's packed with my top 8 tips to help you support your body's ability to eliminate toxins effectively. In this guide, you'll discover the key organs involved in detoxification and how to keep them functioning at their best, nutritional strategies to enhance your body's natural detox pathways, lifestyle habits that can make a big difference in your overall toxin load, and much more. To get your hands on this valuable resource, simply head over to www.rootcausology.com/detox and download your free copy today. That's www.rootcausology.com/DETOX. Trust me, your body will thank you for taking the time to learn these essential detoxification tips. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hello, welcome to Get to the Root of It. I am Laurel Brennan, your host, and I am so thrilled to welcome back Dr. Heather Sandison.
Thanks for having me, Laurel.
Yes, it's so exciting to have you here again. So Dr. Heather Sandison is a renowned naturopathic doctor specializing in neurocognitive medicine and the founder of Solcere Health Clinic in San Diego. It is San Diego's premier brain optimization clinic, and she also is the founder of Marama, the first residential memory care facility to have the goal of returning cognitively declined residents back to their independent living. She has dedicated her career to supporting those suffering with dementia and is the primary author of the peer-reviewed research. It's a long title, so get ready. When she was here last time, she had just submitted it and it wasn't published. Now it is published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. It's called Observed Improvement in Cognition during a Personalized Lifestyle Intervention in People with Cognitive Decline. Dr. Sandison also hosts the annual online Reverse Alzheimer's Summit, where she shares cutting edge and tried and true insight into what is possible for those suffering with dementia. She is excited to shatter common misconceptions about Alzheimer's and share what she has learned about keeping your brain sharp at any age. She has a new book coming out, so we're definitely going to talk about that. I have already gotten on the pre-order, and I'm excited to receive it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, out June 11th, 2024.
Could be a great Father's Day gift.
Yes, it arrives before Father's Day if you order today.
Yeah, and Mother's Day's gift, and birthday gift, and something to put on your home bookshelf because it's critical information that most people don't know. So I'm glad that you're here to spread the word. So let's jump right in. Ready?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Laurel.
My pleasure. Okay, so people come to Marama, or people also come to your private clinic, Solcere, because
they're struggling with cognitive decline, and some have diagnosed Alzheimer's. It's tricky. People often will avoid going to conventional medicine or going to the neurologist because they're afraid they're going to be told there's nothing that can be done. And they're afraid that they're going to have their driver's license taken away. So they're going to feel more isolated and less independent. They're afraid they're going to be told, just come back in 6 or 12 months, maybe go to a very stressful 4 or 5 hour neuropsych eval, but they're not going to walk away with any solutions. And so many people go undiagnosed. And this mild cognitive impairment stage, right? This is the third stage of dementia. So the first stage, and Alzheimer's as well, and there's a lot of overlap between Lewy body and vascular dementia and Alzheimer's are very closely linked. But Lewy body comes up, frontotemporal dementia comes up, posterior cortical atrophy, late is another form of Alzheimer's dementia. And so these are all, they're unique to some degree pathologically, pathophysiologically. However, they all basically refer to this memory loss as we age, and in slightly different forms, or cognitive changes as we age. Some come with more behavioral issues, some with fewer. It's really unique for every family and every individual, but many go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And so again, there's 4 parts of this dementia pathway. So those pathophysiological changes are happening in the brain: the accumulation of amyloid, the neurodegeneration. That is happening often decades before someone is diagnosed with anything. And then the next stage is subjective cognitive impairment. And certainly they're not diagnosed with anything because they have no symptoms, right? This is pre-symptomatic phase, but there's pathophysiological changes going on in the first stage. In the second stage, that's when we start noticing, like, I would have remembered that name 5 years ago, or I wouldn't have misplaced that. I wouldn't have left my purse behind years ago. But now all of a sudden these things are happening, and maybe other people notice, maybe they don't. But it's the subjective cognitive impairment. It's your experience of cognitive decline. It's not quite measurable yet. And then in the mild cognitive impairment stage, there's nothing mild about it. This is when we can measure it, where you're starting to depend on other people, maybe to manage your finances, or you're starting to make those mistakes around finances, and you become more vulnerable. You're maybe not even able to work the way you were before. Or if you are still working, you're noticing that you're not keeping up, and people can measure this. We had quite a few people in our clinical trial who were in this category. So this is when the MoCA score starts to drop. We use the Montreal Cognitive Assessment as an easy way to track cognitive changes. And a perfect score is 30, 26 and above is normal. Mild cognitive impairment is that stage between, like, when you're starting to measure change 23, 22, 23 down into the teens. And now when it gets lower than that, this is often when people are diagnosed with Alzheimer's. This is when they're more dependent on others for their activities of daily living. And this can be exceedingly challenging. And what I see patients on this entire spectrum, right? Many of the people who are coming in for prevention have a genetic risk for developing Alzheimer's. Others are looking to optimize cognitive function, and they don't have genetic risk. But as people go down this path towards Alzheimer's, towards more severe dementia, it gets harder and harder to turn the tide. Now, that being said, I have had too many patients prove me wrong when I have said, I don't think I can help. I don't think this will help. They show me that there are people with diagnosed Alzheimer's, severe cognitive decline. It is possible to turn it around, but man, it is hard. And I can't guarantee anybody turning things around at any stage. However, I have seen it happen at all stages. We have seen people get better. Now, that get better, it's not full recovery. We've never taken anyone from a MoCA of 0 to a MoCA of 30, from severe decline to perfect cognition. But we have seen many people go from 20 to 30. And so that is really exciting. And I think that it gives people back their life. It gives people back their relationships. And that's why I get out of bed every morning, right? It's because I've had patients tell me, many patients, I got my mom back. I got my dad back. I got my husband back. And that is just such rewarding work. And yeah, why I'm so excited to have these conversations.
Yeah. So just to recap, people might come to you in any one of the 4 stages of dementia or Alzheimer's. First, full prevention. They have no symptoms at all, but maybe they have a family history and they want to get on top of things. They might be in subjective cognitive decline where they're starting to notice some changes. And they might be in mild cognitive impairment where that can be measured, and you use the MoCA as an easy tool. And then the full-blown dementia diagnosis where they're struggling with activities of daily living. So you're seeing people across the board and seeing benefit across the board.
Yeah, we do. So it gets more challenging, right? So in the prevention stage, what we do is what we refer to as a cognoscopy. So Dr. Bredesen coined this term. Just like you would look for colon cancer in your 40s or early 50s, we want to look for those modifiable risk factors when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia. So the Lancet, a very, very reputable journal out of the UK, published in 2017 and then updated in 2020, a commission report on Alzheimer's where they detail the modifiable risk factors when it comes to dementia. So this is in contrast to the non-modifiable risk factors. You cannot change the year you were born. You cannot change the gender you were born with. You cannot change your ApoE status, which is one of the genetics that puts us at risk for developing these later onset Alzheimer's. But there are so many things that are very well documented in the research that you can modify to improve cognitive function and reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's. So often when we do these things, even later on, what we see is that people are able to reverse their cognitive decline and get back some of the cognitive, the decline that they've lost. And so that capacity. And so, just to go through these, I'm pulling an excerpt from my book here. So this is the book, Reversing Alzheimer's, out next week with HarperCollins. I'm so grateful to the team who's made all of this happen. There's no way I could have done it on my own. But so when we talk through the Lancet article, less education, and most of this you need in your early childhood and through secondary education, maybe even college. But what we're talking about here is maintaining and producing a cognitive reserve. So we've all met those people who are like brilliant, and then they start to have decline. It's like, okay, now the rest of us can keep up with you. What we want to do is have that cognitive reserve so that if things are sliding a little bit, we can still maintain our dignity, our independence. We're able to work. So, and then also it's about staying cognitively active, taking that identity of lifelong learner. The more education we have, the more cognitive reserve we have, and the more we're flexing that bicep of cognitive engagement. Then hearing loss. Hearing loss is one of those things that goes untreated because the hearing aids, they're going to buzz, or they don't work that well, or the batteries run out, or they're uncomfortable. But when we lose our ability to hear, when we lose that sensory input, we often disengage, so we're more isolated, and that part of our brain can shrink. And so we want to make sure that we maintain as much hearing as possible, and we use whatever prosthesis we can to address that. And then traumatic brain injuries. Many people are familiar with what happens to football players who end up with CTE. This is a form of dementia, and many other people who don't have that particular type of repeated brain injury, if we have motor vehicle accidents or horseback riding or biking accidents, that inflammation can put us at risk for dementia later on, especially when it's untreated. And then hypertension. In this article, I found it somewhat amusing, but they mentioned that the only known medication to prevent Alzheimer's is antihypertensives. So maintaining good levels of blood pressure, really, really treating that and taking that seriously. Many people will come into my office and they'll say, oh, it just happens when I'm in the doctor's. White coat hypertension. It's like, yeah, well, if it's happening when you come to meet us, it's probably happening when you're stuck in traffic and when you go to see your in-laws and when you have to get on a flight and, in many other day-to-day, but somewhat stressful situations. And so taking that seriously, and whether you treat it with lifestyle interventions or you treat it with medication, thinking through that and making sure that you get your blood pressure at a target rate is important. And then weight. Obesity is associated with a higher risk of dementia. Excessive alcohol consumption. Hopefully everybody kind of gets that, right? We've all had a little bit too much to drink and your brain doesn't work the next day. So when you do that regularly, that can add up. And also it can lead to a thiamine deficiency, a vitamin B1 deficiency that can directly impact cognitive function. And we see that same process happen with people who have had gastric bypass or for another reason are not able to absorb vitamin B1. A sedentary lifestyle or a lack of physical activity can also put us at risk, as can depression, untreated depression, type 2 diabetes, air pollution, social isolation, and then sleep disturbances. So, very well researched, very well documented, so many things right there in that list that we can do to prevent to reduce our risk of developing dementia. And then we can stack all of those on top of each other, add functional medicine, and we can see that people will reverse their decline.
Thank you for that list. Anyone listening, it's going to not only improve their brain health, but like everything else, all the health. I'm sure you've noticed that people, when they're focusing on their brain health, that they also feel better overall. Yes.
We have to be careful because often as people get into this Bredesen protocol, what we'll see is that we need to reduce their diabetes medications. We need to reduce their antihypertensives because they're getting the exercise, they're eating the great food, they're on some supplements, they're supporting their health generally. And so many of these lifestyle diseases that often come with aging, they resolve.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to just highlight the sleep thing, because I just had somebody this morning, a client this morning, who she thinks it's probably been maybe 20 years that she has mentioned to multiple different doctors that she doesn't feel rested when she wakes up. And at least 4 different doctors have done nothing about it. 2 of them gave her medication for sleep. And when I started seeing her O2 sats were not quite where we want them at rest. They were like 95. I'm like, a little bit higher would be better. Could we ask your doctor to check for sleep apnea? She has sleep apnea.
So
nobody diagnosed it.
Over the last couple of years. So if you take nothing else away from this podcast, everyone listening, aggressively look for sleep apnea. If you have any cognitive decline, get a sleep study. And now the technology is so much better and it's so much less expensive to get the wearables to have at night. Now you cannot, I'm wearing an Oura ring. I love the wearables. I like the watches and the rings, but they will not diagnose sleep apnea. You need to there is this company WatchPat where you get a watch and a ring and then it beams the information up to a sleep doctor somewhere and a Medicare covers it all. It's like magic. It's amazing. If you can get access to that, if you can advocate for yourself, go in and ask your primary care doctor or a sleep medicine doctor, get a sleep study. The gold standard is still going in overnight, but I've had 2 patients in the past couple of years where they have come in with a MoCA score of 8, a single-digit MoCA score, and they have both nearly doubled that over the course of 6 to 8 months, 6 to 10 months. And they got back. I mean, these were some of the families that said, I got my mom back. Both of these women had undiagnosed, untreated sleep apnea. And we did everything else too. We did a ton with supplements, with some bioidentical hormone replacement. Actually, I don't think either of them got on the bioidentical hormone replacement. Sorry, aside. We did a lot, right? We got them exercising. We got them changing up their lifestyle, changing their diet. And both of them, I think the big pieces, what changed the most was treating the sleep apnea. And this is supposed to be impossible. I mean, even I don't have a ton of confidence when somebody comes in with a single digit MoCA. I am not going to get in the way of somebody who's enthusiastic and wants to try, but it's much harder typically. Unless you find a smoking gun like sleep apnea. And then it's like, oh my goodness. I start to think how many people walking around in the world or not walking anymore have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and they would be so much more functional, so much more engaged in life, not going towards memory care. They just treated their sleep apnea. And that's not weird out there functional medicine, right? Or naturopathic medicine. This is conventional medicine. It's just a matter of applying it.
Can you share why that would be a problem? Like, what is the connection between sleep apnea and
Absolutely.
brain?
So I'm on this kick because I just re-listened to Breath by James Nestor. It's just one of the most insightful, great books, and it's so easy to listen to or read. And in it, he describes a lot of this. But as we've eaten basically softer foods throughout our lives, our mouths, our skull has changed because our ancestors from 300 and 400 years ago, they were biting on bone and they were spending 3 to 4 hours a day chewing. And so that created a different structure in our faces and in our jaw and in our sinuses. And so now many people, especially as we get older, there becomes obstruction in the airway when we're sleeping. On our backs, it's worse, but many people have this on, even when they're lying on their side. And we want is for us to be able to breathe through the nose. Whenever we're mouth breathing, we're not getting the ideal amount of oxygen into the lungs. And so what can happen is when we get this airway obstruction, the brain wants so badly to sleep. Sleep is so important. So the brain wants so badly to sleep that sometimes the brain will stay asleep even though we are starving for oxygen. We're practically suffocating. And then at the last moment, we'll wake up, and this is when we're gasping for air potentially. But even people, so both of these women that I described who had these really impressive, like miraculous recoveries, or, not full recoveries, but have these miraculous improvements in their MoCA scores, they were thin, they were female. No one said they snored because they either didn't have a partner, or their partner maybe slept harder or didn't hear as well. And so no one was picking up on the fact that this might be an issue. And yeah, they were tired, but they're in their 80s. So, people chalk it up to lots of other things. Sleep apnea is one of those things. It's so treatable. It's so important to look for. I just cannot overemphasize. Get a sleep study done. And for people with mild sleep apnea, or even if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I can get a sleep study done tomorrow, what can I do? You can try mouth tape. For many people with mild sleep apnea, mouth tape alone will help to solve the problem. And at first it feels like you can't breathe through your nose, but then it's when you push air through your nose and through your sinuses, the structure of your palate changes, your sinuses change. And when we close it off, the structure changes within days. We change the structure of our sinuses. So it's important to like force air through it. And sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable at first, but it's worth trying and working with a provider and getting the benefit of breathing properly, both when you're awake and when you're asleep.
Yeah. So if they do mouth tape, should they try it first while they're awake just to get used to it, do you think?
Well, yeah, you have to put it on when you're awake. So yes.
And like, yeah, I've talked to some people who are scared of mouth tape. I said, well, just try it during the day, like while you're working on your computer, and just get used to having it on your face and breathing through your nose. But I didn't know that your structure changes that quickly. That is
so
dramatic.
fast. Yeah, it is dramatic.
And I also had a client who kind of in the subjective decline phase, who lives alone, so didn't know if she snored, but thought maybe she snored because sometimes she would wake herself up with a snore. But we did the watch thing that you mentioned, and she was showing lots of apneic events. She's on the other coast from me. She's out where you are. I sent her your way, but first I said, well, there's this sleep study. Why don't you go there? She walked in the door and they told her, you don't have sleep apnea, because she was thin. She said, well, this was my like home thing that says that I do. So could you check it? And then they checked it and they're like, oh yeah, you're having like 50 events a night. But they just looked at her at the sleep study center and said, you're not overweight, so you probably don't have it. But okay.
I am of the opinion anyone with cognitive decline should be tested for sleep apnea, because even if there's a lot of people who end up not having sleep apnea, we're going to catch, I think there's so much undiagnosed sleep apnea happening out there that leads to cognitive decline that's extremely expensive to care for. And so I think even at a societal level, just screening people for sleep apnea, we could save money because we would keep people cognitively sharper and independent longer.
Right.
So that's my soapbox.
Okay. Yes. So that is our soapbox number one. Do you have any more soapboxes?
Oh my gosh, we could go on and on. I mean, we can organize ourselves if you want. Yeah. So I like sharing how I think about complex chronic disease, including the brain, right? So from the conventional perspective, we've attempted for many years with billions of dollars and tons of smart people's time, we've attempted to create a simple solution, a single molecule solution, or an antibody solution, or a neurotransmitter based solution to Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, Alzheimer's is stubborn and does not want to fit in our simple paradigm. It wants to, it's complicated, it's complex. And so what we see is that when we apply a complex systems approach to Alzheimer's and dementia, we see results. Now, this is because many people experience cognitive decline, be on their way towards Alzheimer's, but for different reasons. So they all have mild cognitive impairment, but there's an inflammatory pathway for one person, a vascular pathway for another person, a blood sugar issue for another person, traumatic brain injuries for someone else, genetic predisposition for someone else, or they're not mutually exclusive. Like there's rarely one cause. I would say almost never would there be one cause, but multiple things start to stack on top of each other that then lead to the neurodegradation. So how do we organize ourselves around this? So when I think about the brain, what we want to imagine is that balance is what we're looking for. That's homeodynamic balance in the system. That means the right amounts of the right things at the right time, right place. And so, okay, well, what things? What of those things are going to be causal? Because we look at amyloid plaque and we know, conventional medicine wants to say amyloid, that's the cause. However, or inflammation, I'll hear that all the time, even in the functional medicine world. Inflammation is the cause. But why are they happening? That's the cause. If we can ask, why is that happening, and we can get an answer, then we're not at the causal level. And so when, if there's going to be changes in the pathophysiology, what is triggering it at the very root? And so I would argue that it's imbalances in toxicity, in nutrients, in structure, in stressors, in signaling, and in infections. And when we can systematically evaluate for those things, treat them, eliminate them, balance them, then we can achieve better cellular function.
Yeah. You mentioned toxicity that time, just then. And I have recently read one of your letters where you were talking about toxicity a lot. Do you see that often?
Well, so most of my patients are over 65, they're older, and we live in a toxic world. And so what I see is that, yeah, I think it would be a rare, very rare exception. I cannot think of anyone off the top of my head who was a patient with cognitive decline who did not have toxicity present. Now, is it the smoking gun? Is it like very obvious, like this is what's causing it? No, but we see, mercury levels higher than they should be, mycotoxin levels higher than they should be, environmental pollutants, glyphosate, MTBE, the petrochemicals, parabens, phthalates, those are present in all of us. And so I do think that, especially if you're struggling with cognitive decline, there's a priority to get those out and get those as low as possible. Because having toxins, having infections, again, Dr. Bredesen uses this great analogy. If you imagine that your brain is a country, my brainiston, and your brainiston is at war with infections or it's defending against toxins, that requires resource, just like a country that's at war. It requires money. It requires money to fight a war. It requires ATP. It requires B vitamins and glutathione and all of these expensive nutrients and proteins that are being made in order for us to fight that and defend against them. So it makes sense that, a country that's at war isn't building roads and schools. It's not building infrastructure. It's not. So your brain is in that fight and defend mode. It's in that inflamed mode. And what we want to do is resolve those issues and then shift focus towards regeneration, building the new neurons, building the new connections between them. And that is a process. And so we apply the medicine. But I will say, Laurel, you're working with lots of people and you don't necessarily do all of that testing and that treatment. And there's so many people who come into my office and say, my mom is doing so much better. I'm doing so much better because I changed my diet. I started getting exercise. I started prioritizing my sleep. I started meditating or prayer practice every day. I started socializing differently. I put my brain health first from a lifestyle perspective, which are the foundations. And then the icing on the cake is getting all that data.
Speaking of data, I know that you have some data from your current clients and patients who are living you have two facilities, one in California and one in Kansas.
That's right.
Kansas City, is that right?
It's in Wichita, Kansas.
Wichita. So would you like to share some of that data?
Yeah, really exciting. So we opened the Wichita location in April of 2023. And so we've had our first residents there for there's been 6 people who've been there about 6 months, at least 6 months. And what we saw was that 5 of the 6 of them, I used to say 4 of the 5 of them because that was our data a few weeks ago, but we just got updated MoCA scores. And of the 6 people who we have those MoCA scores for, 5 of them improved. And so this is We have one woman, she's actually such a great case study because she moved into Marama here in San Diego. And then her family, just culturally, they wanted their mom close. They wanted their mom at home. And so they took her home after about 6 months. She had moved in with a low MOCA score. I think it was 12 or 13. And then she moved home with a MOCA score of 20 something. And she had done phenomenally well. So they're like, okay, let's bring her home. And maybe she can do this at home. Unfortunately, her family travels a lot. They weren't there to help implement the program, and she started going downhill. So they said, oh, wow, that was really working well. And no, this is not a cure. This is a lifestyle. This is something that you adopt long term. And so she moved into the Kansas location in August of last year. And her first MOCA score when she moved in there at that point was 13.5. She had lost the gains that she had made at Marama. And her most recent MOCA score in April of 2024 was a 22 out of 30. She had a nearly 10-point gain. She had a 8.5 point gain in the last 9 months. And so this is really, that's not every story, right? The results may vary, but we have a patient who moved in with a MOCA of 20 at the same time. Actually, they moved in on the same day. And so her MOCA score was 20 when she moved in, and now it's 23. So a 3-point difference. And other people who've moved in MOCA of 13 and got up to 15. MOCA of 12, 3 months later is up to 14. So these are exciting numbers. It's exciting statistics. It's in an immersive experience, right? So the people who I see who aren't able to get better often aren't able to implement. Now, I won't say that every single person who implements gets better, right? This is not perfect, and it requires work. So I got a chance to talk to Dr. Bredesen last night, and I just love his approach. He's like, Heather, who isn't getting better? We got to figure out why. He's always curious and interested in how can we make this better? How can we get people who are worse off better more consistently? And that's what we're trying to do. And yet what's so it's not frustrating at this point, but I get where people are coming from. I came to this as a skeptic too, but I'm like, nobody should be told there's nothing you can do. That's just criminal at this point. That's mean. There's this Lancet paper that says that there's so much you can do to prevent. Talk to the people who have reversed their cognitive decline. If you're curious at all, there is so much to learn. There are so many options. It's kind of a choose your own adventure. There is so much that you can do. It's almost overwhelming how much we can do to prevent and reverse and delay cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's.
So you created kind of these brain nourishing environments, and you mentioned how it is really important. And you had one patient who left that brain nourishing environment and was in kind of probably a more typical environment. What does a brain nourishing environment look like?
Yeah. So what we've done is at Marama, we have, everything's organic. So from the food to the mattresses to the bedding, we've really tried to create an environment that is non-toxic. So we don't use toxic cleaning products. We use all non-toxic cleaning products. We use lots of vinegar and rubbing alcohol and lemon and the things that your grandma would have used instead of a lot of Pine Sol or the things that have that chemical smell. And because we know that chemical toxins can go up through the olfactory nerve, through the nose and into the brain and be inflammatory. So we're trying to reduce that as much as possible, as well as personal care products, toothpaste and shampoos and all of those things we use are non-toxic. All of the food is organic and non-toxic and keto. And then additionally, we've set everything up so that, the rooms are on the outside and we really want everyone socializing. We want everyone engaging. We also declutter everything. That's a big priority, is to keep the clutter off of the countertops, because clutter signals, and many of us can relate to this, right? When there's clutter all around us, it signals this feeling of there's a to-do list. I'm not done. And so we don't get that okay, I'm ready. What can I take on? We don't get that fresh start because we're never done checking the list. And so those are just things to kind of start to consider when it comes to a brain nourishing environment, but also distractions, reducing distractions, so that there's not bells chiming or buzzing, things buzzing, or even the dog, the jingle of the collar on the dog can be distracting for people. And so I'm not saying get rid of your dog, but maybe just put on a collar that doesn't jingle jangle, unless that maybe has a positive association. But for some people it doesn't. It actually, all of us, if we're having a conversation, like Laurel, you and I are having a conversation right now. If something happened, if my daughter ran into the room and distracted me, there would be this mental effort that it would take for me to refocus on our conversation. For someone with cognitive decline, I have full cognitive capacity most days, but for someone with cognitive decline, that mental effort to refocus is so much more effort than you or I have to put in. And so what we want to do is minimize the need to refocus. So that means turn the phone off. Maybe don't have music because that background noise, or if you have music, it's uplifting. We can use this to our advantage. Smells, keep the smells to a minimum. All of these inputs that come into our sensory organs, right? What can we hear? If we're trying to drown out background noise, the lawn, somebody taking care of the lawn next door, all of those sounds are a little bit grating, or can be, and they can be distracting from the conversation or from the puzzle we're working on or the art that we're creating. And then visually, what does the clutter look like? What does the environment look like? Can we bring in nature? Can we bring in beautiful natural light or landscape paintings maybe, or art that evokes nature? So what can we see? What can we hear? What can we smell? What are the feels? Is it nice natural fiber or something comfortable, or do we feel uncomfortable in the chairs? We get leather at Marama because when we want natural non-toxic fibers in all the furniture, but also because people struggle with incontinence. It happens as they age. And so we don't want to have absorbent materials in any of our chairs or couches or anything like that. And so we had these chairs, and they were in our activity room, and they were really low. They were leather. They look great. They're this mid-century modern. They're really lovely. And they were at this table, and I'm embarrassed to say how much money we spent on them, but they were so low, nobody ever wanted to sit in them. And so this is the activity table where we were inviting everyone to come and do their brain engaging activities and engage with each other. And our director of operations, Carrie, she was like, Heather, you got to take this table away. You got to take these chairs. And so now it's my dining room table, and nobody sits at it because it's so uncomfortable. It's just basically a showpiece, just like it was there, because the chairs are too low. They're not comfortable. And so if we want someone, like, this changes behavior. I'm sure you've read Atomic Habits. I think most people have at this stage, but he does such a great job of describing how if we want to do things that are healthy for us, make it easy, make it comfortable. And then the things that we don't want to do, make those more challenging. So at Marama, we have the TV behind cabinets. And so if you want to turn the TV on, you don't walk into the great room, the main room there, and see a TV as the primary showpiece. What you see is a cabinet, and then you have to go open the cabinet. Even though it's one more step to turn it on, it's still, we're lazy. We're going to conserve energy. We won't do it, or we're less likely to, right? This TV still gets turned on to play music and do things like that. But there's a little bit more of a barrier that prevents it from being the default.
You just need an occupational therapist next time you set up your facility to walk through ahead of time. You'll save time and money.
Absolutely.
You won't get low chairs. Everyone will be able to get out of the chairs that you get. But you've learned your lesson.
I've learned my lesson.
Yeah. Awesome. So I know that you have people to see, and you're a busy woman. You're a practicing doctor. Is there anything that we could talk for a very long time? You have lots of resources out for people so they can continue to learn more from you. I've listened to your Alzheimer's Summit, Reverse Alzheimer's Summit multiple times. You have tons of fantastic information there. Where should people go? Obviously, they should pre-order your book. Will you hold it up for us one more time?
Yes, Reversing Alzheimer's. The
new toolkit to improve cognition and protect brain health. So what are they going to find in that book?
Yeah. So what we do is basically, I had coaching programs that we had people enrolled in starting a few years ago, and they did way better than I expected. People loved it because so much of Dr. Bredesen's work, it doesn't work if you don't implement it. So you can have all the information in the world, but really what it comes down to, if you want to get the benefits, is implementation. And so this book is essentially, it's that course, but with all of what I've learned coaching over 200, I think we've coached 250 people over the last 3 years through a 12-week program. And so, although this isn't designed to be just 12 weeks, my hope is that you read this and then dog ear it and underline it and go back to it over and over again and layer the pieces on top of each other year after year after year. And so, what we basically do is we set you up to create healthy routines. And then there's a workbook. If you pre-order or order within the next in the beginning of June through June 15th, you get a workbook that comes with it. So we guide you through, okay, how do I think through this? But we have reflection questions at the end of each chapter so that you can think through routines, through exercise, through diet, through brain healing activities, through environment, like we just talked about, and also through the medical piece, how to communicate and partner with your provider. And then we also look forward to the future. What is stem cells or the vaccines or the, what's on the horizon, peptides and exosomes, what does all that look like? And of course, it's constantly changing, but my hope is that at least it gives us a primer for like what might be on the horizon. So that's what's in the book. There's, of course, yes, we could talk for hours. It takes me 12 weeks to present this material. And then really, again, it's about implementation. So I've tried to make it as accessible as possible for as many people as possible. And we have basically suggestions in there under each chapter. There are suggestions in the beginning of brainstorms for people who are in prevention mode in that early stage, and then also if you're caring for someone in a later stage.
Fantastic. So you have information for caregivers as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a section in each chapter that's about communication. So, how do I communicate about this? What do I look for in terms of connecting? So, we say connection over correction. So, we want to connect with people rather than correct them so that we can create more of an alliance, and then they're more on board with the behavior changes or doing what we hope that they will. And also, it diffuses, it creates more joy, more connection, more all of that. It makes the caregiver burden less as well.
So yes, absolutely. I just did a presentation yesterday and connection was like one of our main topics because actually loneliness and disconnection is one of the highest risk factors for mortality. So
Yeah.
like finding that connection with people, with like-minded people to get that support is so critical. And thank you for having that piece for caregivers. I went through that myself. So I was a caregiver for my mom. My dad was the main caregiver, but I may have shared this with you before, but he gave me the gift of connection with her when he hired me as my mom's occupational therapist.
Oh,
The job that I
wow.
had locally shifted, and I was going to have to drive an hour. And I was like, oh, do I want to do that? He said, well, how about if I hire you? My mom had been a first grade teacher, absolutely loved kids. My son was 3 years old at the time. And we decided, first, I wasn't sure that I could handle it, actually, being my
Yeah,
mom's
of
OT.
course.
But then I had this idea, well, she loves kids. She loves her grandkids. My kid needs to learn his alphabet. Let's do this thing where we connect 2 times a week. I think we did 2 or 3 times a week. We went through the alphabet. So we went to the local orchard and picked apples, and we planted flowers for F Day, and we went to harvest eggs at a friend's farm for E. And it was the best connecting activity, like for all of us, right? And so
Wow.
I recommend that for any caregiver, to find what works for both of you so that you can find joy and connection. Yeah.
What a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I don't think I've heard that much detail about how you cared for your mom. It's so challenging because I think we're stuck in this world where it's like we've got to work, we got to pay the bills, we got to pay the mortgage, we got to, and so our kids are at school and our parents are in residential care facilities or in senior living, and they're not, that intergenerational wisdom transfer isn't happening. Those connections aren't being made. that relationship isn't being built, and it's such a disservice, and it's just such a it breaks my heart because I feel like our ancestors, like, they got this. They got, like, there was a natural order of how the elders were supposed to be there to help with childcare. And now we kind of think of both of them as a liability, and we pay to have other people take care of them. And what you described is just this beautiful way that you and your family kind of made that connection a priority. But it's challenging, right? Like like you mentioned, your dad had to hire you to provide care for your mom, because if you weren't working, then how do you pay your bills? So it's just this really challenging. There's no one right answer for everyone. But many people, I think, I get the sticker shock of, oh my God, my parent has dementia or Alzheimer's, or my spouse does. This is going to be bankrupting. It is so expensive, or I have to quit my job to do it. But then how do we pay for everything that we need to do every day and stay in this house and all of those things? It can be very overwhelming.
And that is why I'm mostly in the space of connection. I mean, in prevention, because I'm like, you know what? Wouldn't it be great to spend this little bit of money right now and not pay 10 or 12 or $15,000 a month
Yeah.
for assisted living and dementia care? But
Yeah. Marama
sorry.
costs $12,500 as base. If you need one-on-one care, it does increase from there, so it can get very, very expensive. But people get better. Many of them do. Not everybody, but many people do improve their cognition. If you look around, when we were just kind of doing some market research recently here in San Diego, there are memory care facilities that start at $11,700. So,
And they don't
they
offer what you're offering.
Nope.
Like, they're not there to get better.
Nope. You're not there to get better. You're there to go downhill, and they're going to babysit you while you do. So it's heartbreaking for me, but I really hope, my hope is that the book helps people prevent, reverse, delay dementia, and that also we can start changing the narrative and expect something different from our senior living facilities, and really change that industry.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% support you.
Thank you.
We need something on the East Coast, so we'll have to talk. We'll have to talk. I have a physician that I've connected with here, and we're brainstorming, like, maybe an adult daycare first, and then next level we'll see, because it is so much to implement on your own.
It is so much to implement. What we found was that the cost to provide adult daycare is the same as residential. So
Really?
it was almost easier for people to just move in. And then you can't control what they're doing at home, so it's harder to get into ketosis. A lot of things are a little...
We'll have to have an additional conversation about that, because you've already done the research.
There's a lot. Happy
Yeah.
to talk about it anytime.
Yeah. So any last thoughts before we wrap things up for today?
No, I'm just so grateful to you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. Always a privilege to connect with you, Laurel.
Thank you so much for being here.